Good morning. On behalf of State Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister and the Oklahoma State Department of Education, my name is Tom Kirk, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. So there's several things we're going to be talking about today. We'll start with just the general information, the purpose of the program, a few definitions. We'll have a look at which title programs we're talking about, and then move on to eligibility to receive funds, use of funds, and then a brief word about contracts, and then a somewhat less brief word about the October count, which is coming up. We'll have a look at this year's forms, which are very, very similar to last year's forms, and those, by the way, will be going out either today or tomorrow. And then there are a couple of slides at the end with some resources that I hope you find helpful. So, purpose of the program is to improve educational services for children and youth in local, tribal, and state institutions for neglected or delinquent children and youth, so that such children and youth have the opportunity to meet the same challenging state academic standards that all children in the state are expected to meet. It's also to provide such children and youth with the services needed to make a successful transition from institutionalization to further schooling or employment, and to prevent at-risk youth from dropping out of school, and to provide dropouts and children and youth returning from correctional facilities or institutions for neglected or delinquent children and youth with a support system to ensure their continued education and the involvement of their families and communities. So, who are these children? When we talk about neglected children, these are children who are defined as those students enrolled in a school who are placed in facilities due to abandonment, neglect, or death of parents or guardians. Local educational agencies, which we'll refer to as LEAs from here on out. So LEAs in Oklahoma operate 42 programs that serve more than 3,000 students a year classified as neglected. By delinquent children, we mean those aged 21 or younger who are pre-adjudicated or adjudicated to be placed in a facility. So that would include children awaiting a trial as well as those who have been sentenced. These children attend on-site schools rather than public schools, and there are roughly 3,000 children served by such sites in any given year. Sites operated by LEAs as well as those operated by the state agencies, Office of Juvenile Affairs, and the Department of Corrections. At-risk children then are defined as those who are susceptible to academic failure due to a number of factors that include drug or alcohol problems, pregnancy or parenthood, contact with the juvenile justice system, falling behind 1 year or more academically, membership in or affiliation with a gang, or previously having dropped out of school. Right now, there are 17 programs in Oklahoma that serve over 1,000 at-risk youths. So the title programs that we're talking about here are the Title I Part A neglected, as well as Title I Part D, subparts 1 and 2. So who qualifies for these? The Title I Part A neglected, LEAs who receive a Title I Part A neglected allocation do so because they indicated in the previous year's October count that they have children or youths enrolled in their school district who reside in a locally operated facility for neglected youth. These LEAs are required to use their neglected funds to provide services to neglected children and youth comparable to the services provided in Title I schools. So these would be facilities like orphanages or shelters for abused children and so on. If they are located within the boundaries of your district, then you need to count them in the October count and let us know. And then the allocations of Title I-A funding is based on the reports that we get from the October count. Okay, Title I Part D then is broken down into two subparts, and these can be used for a broader range of programs than Title I Part A neglected. So subpart 1 funds go to state agencies that operate educational programs for children and youths who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk, and for children and youths in adult correctional facilities. So in Oklahoma, there are two such state agencies. That's the Department of Corrections, who serve a number of young people in correctional facilities, and the Office of Juvenile Affairs, which has a variety of situations, and they too provide education for these kids. Subpart 2 funds, this will be relevant to a lot more of the people who are listening in today. Subpart 2 funds are the ones that go to LEAs that provide programs serving children and youths housed in locally operated detention facilities or children and youths who are neglected or at risk. I'd like to add here also, Subpart 2, in nearly all cases, facilities served by the LEA, facilities are served by the LEA in whose district the facility is located. It is possible, though, for facilities to contract with a different LEA, but in that case, the home LEA must agree to that arrangement. Oklahoma law also allows one exception, and that is for facilities to opt for an entirely online curriculum delivered by an LEA other than the one where the facility is housed. And I believe there are, well, that I know of, I think there are 3 situations like that currently in Oklahoma. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. So that's an issue that is coming up in the near future. Okay, state agencies then. So Department of Corrections and Office of Juvenile Affairs are eligible to receive Subpart 1 funds, which they in turn distribute to eligible institutions. These institutions can be either public or private facilities operating for the care of children and youth who are neglected or delinquent, and they provide free public education and a regular program of instruction. In each case, the average length of stay must be at least 30 days. And there are 4 types of these institutions. The first, an adult correctional institution, so a facility in which persons, including persons under the age of 21, are confined as a result of a conviction for a criminal offense. Number 2, an institution for delinquent children and youth. That's a public or private residential facility other than a foster home operated for the care of children and youth who have been adjudicated delinquent or in need of supervision. 3, an institution for neglected children and youth. That is, a public or private residential facility other than a foster home that is operated for the care of children and youth who have been committed to the institution or voluntarily placed in the institution under applicable state law due to abandonment, neglect, or death of their parents or guardians. The 4th type of institution would be a community day program. That's a regular program of instruction provided at a community day school operated specifically for neglected or delinquent children or youth. And I believe there's only one of those currently in Oklahoma, or the last one. Okay, in all of these cases, the children served must be 21 years old or younger, entitled to a free public education through grade 12, enrolled in a regular program of instruction for the required length of time, and that would be 15 hours per week in an adult correctional facility or 20 hours per week in an institution or community day program for neglected or delinquent youth. Okay, and that brings us to the key expression here, a regular program of instruction. Okay, so we're going to define that as an education program consisting of classroom instruction in basic school subjects, such as reading, mathematics, and vocationally oriented subjects supported by state funds. And sadly, we have to put a disclaimer in here that neither the manufacture of goods within the institution nor activities related to maintenance are considered classroom instruction. I'll let you figure out why we have to put that disclaimer there. Okay, LEAs then, so in subpart 2, and this is going to regard most of the people listening today, LEAs receive subpart 2 funds based on the number of students reported in the October count. And these students are aged 5 through 17. They live in a locally operated facility and are not counted under subpart 1. They live in an institution for at least 1 day during a 30-day period. Children then are categorized as either neglected or delinquent based on the purpose of the facility. So if there's, occasionally this happens where you have somebody and there's not a shelter available or a space, and they may spend the night at a facility for delinquent youth, or the other way around. You may have somebody who's waiting for a spot in a delinquent facility and they get housed in a shelter temporarily. They're counted based on how the facility is categorized, not based on the individual child that's put there. Then it's the LEA that must ensure that children and youth in the local correctional facilities are participating in an education program comparable to the one the LEA operates in the school that such children and youth would otherwise attend. This is important. It's the obligation of the LEA to make sure that the kids in these facilities get a complete program. That means you can't cut on hours, you can't cut out subjects, that they get an education comparable to what they would get at your local schools. Okay, then, if a school receiving subpart 2 funds is not a Title I Part A school, then the LEA can identify at-risk youth enrolled in the school and dedicate some Title I Part D funds for these kids. So these categories for at-risk would be youth adjudicated in the juvenile justice system but returned to a school operated by the LEA, so kids who've come out of facilities and come back into your schools. Gang members can be categorized as at-risk, pregnant or parenting youth, or children who are simply at risk of failure or who have failed before. Here I think the big defining thing is if students are a year behind in school, then you can identify them as at risk. Also, children who have dropped out of school in the past can be categorized as at risk, and you can spend Title I-D funds on those kids, comparable to what the services they would get in a Title I-A school. So, use of funds. The first thing here, for state agencies receiving subpart 1 funds are required to spend at least 15% up to 30% of their funds on transition services. Okay, that's a big chunk. The LEAs do not have the same requirement, but we do want to put some emphasis on transition services for everyone. Okay, then under subpart 2 for LEAs that receive subpart 2 funds are required to carry out high-quality education programs for the completion of high school, entering training or employment programs, or further education. They're required to provide activities facilitating transition from correctional facilities. And again, you don't have a specific percentage required, but you do need to dedicate some funds to transition services. LEAs are also required to operate dropout prevention programs for at-risk youth or youth returning from correctional facilities. Okay, this is broadly part of the transition. You want to make sure that the kids who transition out of correctional facilities don't just drop out or drop out soon after that. And this is a requirement. There's not a specific percentage in terms of how much money you need to dedicate to these things, but you are required to have some kind of dropout prevention program. So some examples then of allowable uses and non-allowable uses. So things you can spend Title I-D funds on: after-school tutoring, a liaison or coordinator. You can spend money on paraprofessionals, health and social services, supplemental classroom supplies and technology. And here, supplemental is key. You cannot supplant. So if there are supplies or technology that are provided to kids in your other sites, in your normal sites, you have to provide those to N&D sites with the same funding. So Title I-D funding can be used for anything that goes above and beyond that. Supplemental counseling or mentoring. Again, supplemental is a key word here. Dropout prevention programs, as well as vocational, technical, or life skills education. Things you cannot use money for are teacher salaries for core instruction. That would be supplanting. Supplies and materials for core content areas. That too would be considered supplanting. Any item normally supplied in a regular classroom setting. Same reason. Items to be used by students not considered neglected, delinquent, or at risk. Okay. Basically, the Title I-D funds have to target specifically your neglected, delinquent, and at-risk kids, and without any spillover. And also anything not directly related to education or transition. Then for administrative costs, the same regulations that apply elsewhere apply to Title I-D. So based on average daily attendance, LEAs can spend either 5, 7, or 8% of their Subpart 2 funds for administrative costs. And that would depend on the size of your district, which percentage group you fall into. Okay, next topic, contracts. All LEAs are required to have a contract with each facility in which they provide instructional services. So if there's a facility within the boundaries of your district, you're required to serve them, and you're required to have a contract that spells out the terms of that service. Any state agency seeking educational services from an outside entity is required to have a contract with the service provider. And these contracts, by the way, should be uploaded with your consolidated application in the Title I-D section. The LEA or state agency exercises administrative control and assumes responsibility for monitoring the contract to ensure compliance with applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. So that brings us to the last topic here, and I've got several slides on this topic, but I think it should go pretty quickly. The October count, which is coming up. There are two distinct forms for reporting the October count. One is for the caseload of children and youths residing in facilities operated by a state agency. So those DOC and OJA that get Subpart 1 funds, you have one form, and there is a different form for those residing in a locally operated facility, those receiving Subpart 2 funds. When I send these out, I will send, here, I shouldn't say this because then I'll mess up. I will send the Subpart 1 form to DOC and OJA. I'll send the Subpart 2 form to all the LEAs. All LEAs, as well as state agencies, are required to report October caseload counts of children or youth for whom the LEA or SA provide an education and who reside in eligible local institutions. If you have no institutions in your district, you still have to fill out the form, but in that case, it won't take you very long at all. I think about 30 seconds should do it. You just put zeros in the columns and sign at the bottom. But you have to do that and send it back to me. Okay, so the counts are conducted beginning October 1st and ending October 30th. And you keep a daily record of the number of overnight residents aged 5 through 17. And then the count for the day with the greatest number of overnight residents is the high water mark is reported. So you may have only 5 kids spend the night there all month except October 27th when you have an influx, you've got 16 kids, say. That's the number you report. So you report the number of kids in the institution on the night with the highest number of kids in the institution. Okay, so let's have a look at the forms. For state agencies, it's all pretty straightforward. Have the name and address of the institution up here, and the name and the address of the state agency. There are 3 yes or no questions, basically, to ensure that you've counted right. Then we have another one down here, excuse me, where you check, mouse here, you check which type of facility you're reporting for, and then the number of children or youths in that facility on your count. We've even blacked out the boxes that if you shouldn't be putting any numbers in. And then there's an adjusted figure. So you take the number from part 3 up here, multiplied by the number of days that the program operates, divided by 180. That's in case you operate for more than that, and that will give you the adjusted enrollment number. Form for LEAs is much simpler. There are 2 parts. The first part, you put your county and district code and the name of your LEA, the name of your school district. If you have a facility in your district or more than one facility, you put the names of the facilities here. If you don't have a facility, you leave this blank. Okay, and then the number of neglected kids. Again, if you don't have a facility, you put a 0 there. Number of delinquent kids, or 0, and then the total, or 0. And then you add each of these columns and come up with a figure here across the bottom. Again, if you don't have a facility in your district, just a row of zeros across here, and the name of your district is fine, and you are pretty much done. But we have part 2 here. If there has been a variation of more than 25% from last year, so maybe they've added on to your facility, or maybe they closed a facility in your district. So if there's a significant change in the number of kids that you're reporting, just a very brief statement of why that change, and then a signature, name and signature, as well as date, and you're done. Okay, so once you've done that, you scan the form, and you send it back to me by November 15th at ndoctobercount@sde.ok.gov. There is also in the form, that email address is embedded as a hyperlink. I think it says NND October Count. If you click on that, that'll take you to this email address. Or you can send it to my email address down here, thomas.kirk@sde.ok.gov. If you have any questions, let me know. That's my email address and my phone number. And then we have some resources here. If you would like a copy of this, let me know. I can send the PowerPoint to you. There are a number of resources out there on administration of the program, a lot of ideas for transition services or things you could be doing with such youth in your district. A few more over here. I'll leave this up for a second so you can see them. This will all be posted on our website within the next few days. So if you don't have a chance to get a screenshot here, they will be available soon, or I would be happy to send you my PowerPoint. That's the end. So, any questions here? I've got a few questions on the chat box already. Okay, could we use funds to help students assimilate into the school setting? For example, students normally belong to clubs or after-school activities, band, athletics, chess club, etc. Students at the facility do not have this opportunity because of the facilities program guidelines. May we provide enrichment activities for the students, study skills, art projects, how to make healthy snacks? Would you like to reach out to students and develop school-friendly school-student facility? Yes, is the question there. You use the funds for supplemental activities, and you could also these things could be considered transition. If you're helping these kids transition back into a normal school setting, then that is acceptable. Also providing enrichment activities. Those too are acceptable expenses, as long as they are not supplanting things that are paid for with your normal state and local funding. That is okay. Supplemental instruction is fine. Usually supplemental instruction takes the form of tutoring or summer school or credit recovery courses. I have a new day treatment center, partial hospitalization this year. Can I serve them this year? Okay, you actually are required to serve them this year. There's a lag on the funding, though. The students that you report this year will result in funding for next year. Send me an email anyhow about this, because there might be some funds available this year, but I'm not sure. I have to look into if there's anything available. Can we help with fees such as state IDs or Indian native enrollment cards? I don't think so. I'll have to look into that, though. If that's something you do with your other students, then no, because that would be considered supplanting, but it kind of depends on the situation in the facility. Why don't you give me a call or email me with the specific setting, and we'll figure something out. Other questions? Any questions from those of you here in the room? You're being very quiet today. Going once. Going twice. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in, and until next time.